Hello and welcome to the distribution team meeting, December 31st, 2020. Today I am going to be running through, uh, maybe for the first time on my machine here, a setup of GitLab and GitLab Geo, but with the GitLab Geo using Patroni standby cluster. So this is a change that has been added to the omnibus for the previous release, and is something the Geo team has been working through in the Patroni support. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So for this, I'm currently working on some reviews related to changes around the standby cluster, and so when I'm working on reviews, I kind of very much focus on booting up the minimal or very close to the minimal cluster needed to test it in some cases, especially early on in the review, to be able to iterate fast back and forth on the review in these test environments. So I'm actually using Docker and Docker Compose to set up basically a full environment that will exercise the standby cluster, but not necessarily be an environment that anyone will use in production. So what that looks like is our 3 console nodes of our primary application, 2 database nodes for that primary application, 1 PG bouncer for the primary application cluster, and 1 app node. Because I'm focusing on the database replication. That's why, even though the rest is redundant other than PG bouncer, that I only have 1 app. And then on the Geo side, it's basically a mirror of that with 3 consoles for Geo, 2 GeoDBs, a GeoPG bouncer, a Geo app, and I've also split out the Geo's tracking DB into a separate container as well. So these are all running the omnibus image, all running the nightly. And I've just started, prior to this meeting, bringing up some of the primary cluster. So far, I've just got the console instances up and just the DB1. So I'm going to continue with that. So I'm going to bring up the second database. I want to jump into the settings here. These are taken from the Geo installation doc. So actually, we can jump over there. So on the Geo database replication, we actually have a section now on Patroning support. And so this is for the database setup. My primary is basically following the settings here. The main difference between this and the normal setup is, of course, rep manager is set to false. We've got Patroni set up with PG rewind, and we've declared a physical replication slot for Patroni to set up in Postgres. And then on the standby cluster side, we once again have rep manager disabled, and then we have Patroni. Well, that's interesting. I think this is actually a bug. So Patroni should be enabled, and I think it's enabled on mine, with standby cluster enabled. So I'm going to continue setting up the primary. We've got a second database up and following the first. And bring up PG bouncer. as I mentioned before, for especially for these HA setups, I like using Docker Compose just because of how quickly I'm able to bring up the instances versus setting up VMs. Which is a lot nicer for review iteration when working on reviewing some changes that are impacting the HA setup. So it looks like we did get the PG master set up, and it got the found the correct master. Now we will bring up the application node. So in this scenario, I haven't moved Redis into HA. I haven't moved Redis to have the Sentinel set up or anything like that. So everything else other than the databases are basically running in the app nodes. Once again, not necessarily something you would do in production, but something that lets us exercise the database replication portions quickly. So one nice thing is the switch to Patroni and the use of these standby clusters has made it easier to set up this sort of scenario. This was pretty difficult, or at least included a lot more configuration in order to set up this same sort of thing previously with GitLab to set up a secondary cluster in Rep Manager that was replicating from the first. Here in Patroni, we basically didn't have to write a whole lot else under the hood. This config right here is being passed right into Patroni, and that is setting it up for us. We still have some limitations here. We're still working on getting service discovery and console set up in a way that we can make use of the potentially changing leader host. Okay. Now we should have the main application up. I need to upload a license to get Geo functionality. Create another project just to give it something to replicate off the start. Okay. Now let's start bringing up the Geo Cluster. So I haven't I haven't previously set up this config that I'm working on here. I have gotten the databases up, but I haven't gotten, this will be the first time I've done the PG bouncer and the Geo app on this standby cluster. So we'll bring up the Geo console. And just wait for them to elect a leader. No, okay. They've done that. Bring up one of the Geo databases. So it looks like it knows it's a standby leader. It looks like we have the log cursor running on this database. It's probably something I only want running in the application node. Well, I might go ahead and turn that off in a minute here, but I'm going to continue on. Bring up the second database in the standby cluster. So the first one knows that it's a standby and it's also a leader of the standby cluster. And the secondary database up. Now we'll see if this works. Bringing up the PG bouncer. Well, that looks right. Looks like it found the correct database. Okay, let's continue on. Let's bring up the tracking database. So just to jump through a bit of the config, we use roles. So this is the config for the application side. It's just got an application and a geo secondary role. I've specified its geo node name. It's migrations off. And I've configured console with the geo console nodes and the monitoring service discovery. And then it should be pointed at, this is the tracking database, and this is PG Bouncer. So the normal migrations are off, are turned off, but it looks like the tracking database migrations were turned on. Luckily, it seems like that went through and actually created them. So far, the only issue I'm seeing is that I have the geolog cursor turned on the database nodes, as well as here on the application. Okay, it's not happy. It's not super pleased about connecting to this PG bouncer. Oh, They have the wrong port. So in the Geo app, I'll probably have to do that in the tracking database as well.
And you're changing that port primarily because you're running all on the one instance, one host.
No, it's just the our PG bouncer instances are by default they're running this port versus Postgres, which is running on 5.
Okay. Okay.
So basically, it just means that this previous config I had was copied from a non-PG bouncer Geo setup.
Yep.
But when we're going through PG bouncer, we have to change the. You have to tell Rails that it's a different port than the default Postgres port because we're connected to PG bouncer. Oops. Exec. Oh yes, I have some deprecated configuration here that isn't being used. It didn't actually restart anything, so that probably isn't making it happy. Oh, it looks like it did restart. Eh. That does, in fact, look like, at least from a installation setup, that it's happy. Let's see what else we might need to do here. So one of the things you have to do normally is run this set primary node. But this is in the docs, this is steps without patroni. Well, we might still do that. No, what do we have to do? Now for patroni, there's a step 3 initialize the replication process. I'm pretty sure that's already taken care of for us. So maybe we just need to do this. And we'll say the replication part is complete, and we'll jump on to the configuration part. So in my setup, my secrets and host keys have already been synced. So it looks like I just need to start adding Geo node through the UI. So we'll just go back. And, yep. Interesting. Okay. I need my secondary node name. Oh, interesting. So it is operating enough to be actually up here. Is it replicating? It hasn't replicated yet, but I just turned, or at least it's not, look, it's replicating the database, but not, hasn't yet finished replicating the repositories. Let us run the geo check here. We'll also run it on the geo app. This is normal in the Docker container. Okay, so the primary is happy. I haven't apparently disabled my authorized keys right yet. It's otherwise happy. This is actually working better than I thought it was going to. Which might make for a rather boring demo. So we can see we haven't done any of our replication yet. And that might be fairly normal with the fact that I haven't restarted the log cursor yet. Yeah, so last thing that came in on the log cursor was an error. And the log cursor doesn't actually output much, but I'm more making sure that it isn't outputting an error. Which it doesn't look to be. It's a healthy secondary, but it still hasn't replicated the repo. So let us give it something fresh to replicate. See if a new event works better. another repo. Well, you can see the database replication is working, but the log cursor has not. We're so close. The part that I was expecting not to work is working, which is the database replication. And the part that should have already been working isn't. Well, it says that it's done it now. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if the restart actually helped or if it's just a matter of patience that helps. But yes, replication is now set up both on my previous instance and on my previous created project and on the new one I created with after we had set up the Geo apps. Okay. That actually all went better than I was expecting. The main thing that's still throwing errors is that the Geo log cursor is enabled on, well, there's a couple things. The Geo log cursor is enabled on my database nodes. So let's jump into our Patroni support. And oh, that's the primary. We want to look at the secondary. Okay, so on their secondary, they aren't including in the instructions, they aren't including the Geo secondary rule, which I am, which is probably the cause of my issues with that. So yeah, if we jump in here, I bet you I'm including, yeah, the Geo secondary rule. Okay, so that's where my config is wrong. Is that if I am going to use this, it's going to enable that geolog cursor, and I'd have to manually set it to disabled for that. Okay, so that makes sense. But then the other thing they had was Patroni enabled false. I don't see that. Whoops. I don't see that working. So I don't see how these are going to work with Patroni disabled. So that's the last thing we'll try at the moment. But other than that, I think we're good. I'm just going to jump into the database node and restart it and see what happens, or reconfigure it.
Did you disable Patroni on your primary too? Thought that's what I see. That's the secondary.
I think I just did it. So this is still the both.
Okay, that's secondary. Yep.
Yeah, they're both secondaries, and I think it's still enabled on the primary.
Okay.
Because they didn't mention disabling it here.
Yeah, the documentation shows it enabled on the primary.
Yeah.
I just thought I saw flip by. I didn't see the secondary definitions. I thought you were changing your primary too.
I don't think so. So I think we're still enabled on the primary.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, it's okay. It's enabling Postgres and disabling Patroni. I don't see that working. Oh, Postgres is even down. Okay. Well, okay, so this is because Patroni actually set up the standby data. Not the problem with the replication slot, but I mean, just the fact that it's got data and is in standby mode is likely more related to the fact that Patroni set that up previously. I don't see why we would do this though. No, we have to have Patroni running. I don't know. I'll look a little bit more into it, but I'm fairly certain that that is a documentation bug. Because I just don't see how it can properly function. Well, actually, it can't. It can't be properly clustered as a standby cluster without something in place.
Unless when you enable the standby cluster, it brings Patroni back in. But
That's what I was
Doesn't look like
wondering, but
that,
from the status, it doesn't like it looked like it actually removed it.
exactly. Yeah, I would say that's a doc error.
Yeah, I think so.
It's just an oversight when they wrote the docs.
I'm gonna bring it back, and we'll call that good for today's demo. Yeah, in terms of reviews, I'm working on this because we're trying to update Patroning to the 2.01 release. We're on 1.64 or something like that. So I just wanted to make sure that I had environments that could actually confirm and test that upgrading worked, and needed this standby cluster set up to be able to test the upgrade. Yeah, so that should be it. So we have Patroning up and running. Being that this one was down for a while, we can see this was GeoDB1. We didn't watch, but it probably should have failed over to DB2 while we were at it. Yeah, it did. Jumping back up in the log, see if we can see it doing it. Yeah, here we go. In between the geolog cursor crashing. Yeah, we can see it transitions from not having the lock and replication being terminated then after the geolog cursor errors. To getting the lock. Registering service as yeah, standby leader. Cool. Well, that's good. Looks like everything's working. Went a little bit over time on the demo, I think. But yeah, we'll call it there for today.
All right, sounds good. Have a good day.
You too.
Have a
Bye.
good New Year too.
You too.